Thank you to AccuFlow for sponsoring a portion of today's video. Hi, I'm Anu Yudin. I'm a doctor of clinical psychology and an author, and today I want to talk about kickstarting motivation, and specifically why you shouldn't wait for motivation or inspiration to hit you, but rather you have to just start to put it in motion. I think there's this misconception out there that there are some people who have motivation and others who don't, when the reality is that nobody wants to do things that they don't actually like. From the outside looking in, it might seem like there are some people that just accomplish all these things that are not fun for them, and people say, wow, they must be so motivated. The truth is that they don't want to do these things. The one thing that people who look motivated do differently is that they take that first initial step, that initiative that then kickstarts the rest of the process. Let me explain what I mean by this. Newton's law of motion says that an object at rest remains at rest and an object in motion remains in motion unless acted on by an unbalanced force. What does this mean? I got my lip gloss here and I got my coffee here. Let's assume that my coffee is a car, okay? So the car is coming, it bumps against the lip gloss gets into motion. Here's what's not gonna happen. Both are at rest. Lip gloss isn't going to start moving of its own volition. Something needs to hit it. Now, psychologically, this can look like, for example, writer's block. A lot of writers struggle with writer's block. It's not something that I really struggle with, and let me explain why. I don't wait for inspiration to hit me. I don't only write on the days when I feel like I have something I want to say. I start writing no matter what. I start writing and then the inspiration comes to me. Most of the times when I go into what I'm going to write that day, usually it's about 3,000 words. I might have like a general idea of this is what's going to happen in this chapter and maybe like the next couple of chapters. But once I get writing, it always changes around, and creative ideas always spark in the moment. If I were to stop and plan it out and outline it, then it would be very boring, because the most creative ideas, I believe, come from a person's unconscious, which is unlocked when you're not thinking about it. So if the lip gloss is inspiration and the car is writing is what's going to knock the inspiration to get into motion. You're not going to get inspiration in motion unless you kickstart it. An object at rest will remain at rest. An object in motion will remain in motion. If you wait for inspiration to strike in order to kickstart motion, then you will be waiting your whole life. Rest does not kickstart motion. Only motion kickstarts motion. Another quote by a great physicist, Einstein: "Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." It's the same concept. If you want to actually move forward, you have to actually move to start with. If you don't keep moving, you're going to fall flat on your face. And so I think a lot of people who struggle with motivation, who struggle with accomplishing things in their day-to-day life, are waiting for that first kickstart, are waiting for that first little bump of motion. But as long as they are at rest, that bump of motion will never come. So then the question becomes, well, okay, but how do I do that first step? I cannot produce motion. How do I produce motion out of rest? Well, one thing you can do is you can stop thinking about it and you can actually do the thing. Go into autopilot and instead trick your body into actually performing that very first action in a task. For example, let's say you just had dinner, you're sitting down and you know that you need to do the dishes before you go to bed. If you sit there and think about it and contemplate it, when am I going to do the dishes? How am I going to do the dishes? Should I procrastinate doing the dishes? Should I give myself a little bit more time after dinner? Should I do them right now? You're not doing the dishes. You're just thinking about it. If, on the other hand, you almost go into like autopilot and without even thinking about it, your body just automatically goes to the kitchen, takes your sink there and starts washing it. You'll be done with the dishes before you have a chance to think about it. And so you just have to ask yourself, what is the first micro movement that I need to make to kickstart this motion? Maybe it's picking up the plate, walking towards the sink, turning on the faucet, grabbing the sponge. Micro movement by micro movement, you will start to kickstart that motion. And once you form a habit of going into autopilot, if night after night you perform this, you go into autopilot, it becomes muscle memory. And not only do you not have to think about doing the action, you automatically do it, it becomes hard to resist doing it, because once it's become a habit, that is by definition what a habit is. Not just something that you do, but something that's difficult to resist doing. That's why we have a lot of unhealthy habits. That's why if you formed a habit, for instance, to reach for a glass of wine every day after work, or to start your day by scrolling on your phone for an hour, those are habits. They're not only easy for you to do, they're challenging for you to stop. And so if you can form these healthy habits through muscle memory, through going into autopilot day after day after day, it will become so easy to actually do these things. People who look very motivated, they're operating on muscle memory, on routines and habits that really work for them because they took that first step of not thinking about it, just doing the first thing. As I try to practice this new language that I'm learning almost every day, on the days that I don't do it, it actively feels strange because it's like I'm actively going against this habit that I formed. And the average person takes about 1 month to form a new habit. Some require less, some require more. So as you continue to put one foot in front of the other day after day after day, within a month, you could already find it so much easier to do these things. So next we're going to talk about how to actually take that first step of momentum and why people who look motivated take that first step. But before that, let me tell you about today's sponsor, AccuFlow. So one thing that can really help you take the very first step in day-to-day life is knowing exactly what you're going to do. And for that reason, planning out your day and deciding when to do everything is very necessary. AccuFlow is a time blocking platform that allows you to do just that. It empowers you to effortlessly consolidate all of your tools in one spot and block off time in your calendar. This way you can plan out your day ahead of time so that when it comes to Monday morning and you're trying to decide what to do, you already know exactly what to go into. You can get right into the first step in the first task, making it easier to not procrastinate. So here's how to use AccuFlow. First, it's important to link the integrations into the calendar so that you have all your apps and email in one place. You go to the calendar and you can either create a slot or an event or a task for a specific time in your calendar. And you also can decide how long you want it to go. So if you choose a slot, you can either type in the tasks there, or you can put them into the sidebar and then drag them into your schedule. You can also easily organize tasks into labels or tags so that you can keep track of the different types of tasks you have on your plate. AccuFlow also allows you to prioritize certain tasks, keeping the most important at the forefront of your day. It has notification features which remind you about the next task to get started on. There's also the rituals button, which allows you to review yesterday and prepare for today. You can also use the command bar from anywhere on your computer, so you can easily add or manage tasks with a personalized keyboard shortcut. And it also has one-on-one productivity coaching. And you also get an onboarding call with AccuFlow. It's a great way to balance structure with flexibility so that you can adjust your schedule according to what you need. So if you're looking for something to just make that first step easier, check out AccuFlow using the link in the pinned comment and the description box. Thank you again to AccuFlow. So back to the issue of how do we actually get that first step in motion? How do you even get motion out of a state of rest? Like I said, nobody wants to do something that's not fun for them. So why do some people do those things anyway? I think it comes down to largely 3 reasons. To avoid punishment, to get a reward, and because they've run a cost-benefit analysis and decided that the benefits of doing that thing outweigh the costs of not doing it. So number 1, to avoid punishment. Why do teenagers do their homework? They don't want to get in trouble with their school, with their parents. Most of them wouldn't do it otherwise. Why do you do your job? Because otherwise you get fired. You can't afford for things that you need in order to live. It can be either positive punishment, meaning something bad happens to you, or it can be negative punishment, meaning something that you want gets taken away. And so a lot of the reason why people do the things they do in day-to-day life is to avoid some sort of punishment. They don't want to get in trouble with them, for somebody to yell at them, or they don't want for something that they value to get taken away, like their ability to put food on the table. Number 2, to get a reward. Now, rewards can also be positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, meaning it can be positive reinforcement, you get something you want, negative reinforcement, something that you don't want gets taken away. Now, the best rewards are intrinsic, meaning they come from within. Things like a sense of self-efficacy, a sense of competence, feeling aligned with your values, feeling like you have integrity. That should be your main focus. But I won't lie, I love me a good extrinsic reward too. I love to reward myself recently with a day off at the end of every month. I find it to be very incentivizing. It's like a double reward. As long as you have the intrinsic motivation, it's okay to also have an extrinsic motivation. So for me, very often, the reason I do things right away is because I want that reward of being able to sit down at the end of the day, to have a glass of kombucha, to be reading, to not have any tasks on my to-do list. That to me is the best reward. It sounds so pleasant, and so if I have the choice between doing something now or doing something later, I will always do it now so that I can have more reward in the future. Like I said, number 3, the benefits outweigh the costs. So this is often related to reinforcement because the rewards of doing a task are the perceived benefit, and the punishment you receive if you don't do the task is the perceived cost. So if you're finding it difficult to motivate, you have to have a very real conversation with yourself and make a weighted pros and cons list, like the one I mentioned in the personal growth journal. What am I getting out of not doing this task? Because whether you want to accept it or not, whether you're conscious of the reasons or not, when you choose not to do something, you are making a conscious decision. decision to say, doing this doesn't benefit me as much as not doing it in some way. Like I said, this is a really difficult conversation to have with yourself because, for instance, you might find that I just get a lot of pleasure out of not doing it, or maybe I get a secondary gain out of not doing it. It's very likely that when you come across this cost-benefit analysis, this weighted pros and cons list, you realize that you're running some sort of cognitive distortion in your head. And once you get it out on paper, you can realize, oh, hold on, I've been operating under the assumption that this is true. And now that I'm looking at it, it's not true at all. It would way benefit me more to just do this thing first. You can better assess if you're making some sort of miscalculation if you make your intentions very apparent and put them on paper. For example, I don't like driving. I get a little nervous when I'm driving. So if I were to sit down and run a cost-benefit analysis of driving today versus not driving today, I would probably find that for some reason I've assessed that not driving today outweighs driving today. And I might be able to look at that list and see, well, this is operating under distortions, like, oh, I'm going to get into an accident, when in reality that's very unlikely. And in correcting those distortions, I might come to realize, okay, when I look at this objectively, driving today outweighs not driving today. And I would then need to take the very first step. I would need to reach for the car keys, head out the door, turn on the engine, start pressing the pedal, step after step after step, little tiny micro movements, getting my body into autopilot, getting it to do the thing without thinking about doing the thing, to start getting in motion without thinking about getting in motion, which is going to keep me at rest, without ruminating about it and without talking myself out of it. So in summary, Newton's law of motion says that an object at rest remains at rest and an object in motion remains in motion unless acted on by an unbalanced force, which means if you want to get into motion, you cannot stay at rest, you have to actually kickstart that motion. You do this with micro step after micro step until eventually, once you do it over and over again, it becomes muscle memory and it becomes a habit that's actually difficult to resist. So in order to take that first step, write down a pros and cons list of doing it versus not doing it and challenge yourself to think about the ways in which your viewpoint might be distorted. See the ways in which not doing the task is more of a cost to you than just doing it. And consider the punishments of not taking action and give yourself rewards for taking action, intrinsic or extrinsic. Don't forget to check out AccuFlow, and I'll see you soon.